Welcome back, participants. We have one final panel session this morning, which will explore the subject of business models to support the digital economy and SME sector. The discussions will be centered on the influences of the digital age on the economy and analyze how alternative lenders have emerged over the years, which are particularly relevant for the SME sector. Let us welcome our moderator for this session, Mr. Giaz, Senior Policy Manager for Digital Finances at AFI.
A very good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome back after the coffee break, and welcome to the last technical session of the workshop. Like they say, we save all the best things for the last. So we'll get down to the basics. We'll talk about a humble subject. We talk about SME access to finance. It's humble, but it's really very important to the economy. I'll just give you a brief context. SMEs are the bedrock of most developing economies. World Bank estimates that formal SMEs contribute 60% of the total employment and 40% of GDP in emerging economies. These numbers are significantly higher when informal SMEs or micro enterprises are included. While the consensus that SMEs are one of the most potent catalysts for poverty alleviation, access to finance has consistently been one of the main challenges for their growth. In Africa, for example, it is reported that there is 331 billion SME finance gap. So in addressing this gap, technology appears to present a promise to tackle both the demand and supply side challenges while also enabling a rapid scale up. So we'll discuss that topic in this session, and we'll broadly break this discussion into three kind of digital platforms and its relevance to SMEs in three kind of baskets. First is in terms of access to information. Second, in terms of access to marketplace. If an SME, the addressable market is within 5-10 kilometers of its location, then there is only so much that they can do. How can we broaden and deepen the access to marketplace? And finally, the most important thing, digital platforms and enabling SME access to finance. So these three kind of dimensions we'll discuss. And also to give a structure to this discussion, we'll first talk about the context in Seychelles, and then what are the challenges that the country is facing in terms of SME access to finance, and then what are the solutions. That's where we'll have examples from the other economies. So we have Bank of Thailand represented here through Tiravat, who's the deputy director there, and Mr. Lin Arvik from Estonia. But let us start off with the lady in the panel, Ms. Aisha. She is from the Department of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development. I request you to provide a context of the SMEs within Seychelles, and also if you can provide briefly, keeping the audience in mind, what is your department doing broadly? Over to you, Aisha.
Okay, thank you, Giaz, for your question. Good morning, everyone. So just to provide a bit of background and context, as per the Enterprise Seychelles Agency Act, an MSME is defined as a business that has an annual turnover of up to 25 million, not exceeding that, or not exceeding 50 employees. And this brings us to the point that over 80% of our businesses in Seychelles falls within that category, which highlights the point that, you know, MSME is pivotal to our economy. They are the driving force of our economy. Hence, it is very important for them to get the required assistance and attention for them to go. And this is where the department comes in. The Department of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development has got a key role in creating an enabling environment for the business to thrive and have a playing field, a fair playing field. The primary responsibility of the department is to ensure that there is adequate flow of credit from the financial institutions. There are infrastructures in place and modern testing facilities and quality certification. And also it's important to build the capacity of MSMEs and support their product development. With this in mind, the government introduced the Enterprise Seychelles Agency last year, which substituted SEPA, which previously focused on mostly cottage industry. The government saw it fit that we needed a more inclusive development. And as having the role, Enterprise Seychelles Agency mostly advises business and assists them with capacity building. Whilst we are discussing Fintech, they are hosting a workshop regarding digital entrepreneurship next week, which I think is very relevant at this point in time, as the needs of businesses are also changing, and it is important to create the awareness in Seychelles and to adopt technology. Other initiatives that the government has come up with when it comes to access to credit is the SME scheme. The statistics of last year illustrates that about 595 businesses benefited from the SME scheme, which is whereby the government subsidized the prime lending rate with the SME rate that is offered in order to provide a more competitive rate to this sector. And it was a value of about 481 million in loan. Moreover, other financing schemes that we've had is the seed capital, which is geared towards startup businesses. And just earlier we were having a chat, Giyaz, regarding the role of women in businesses in Seychelles. It is significant to note that, unlike mainland Africa, our statistics prove that women are not really marginalized in businesses here. Access to credit is not an issue for women compared to mainland Africa. Moreover, when it comes to the digital platform, we've seen that government has embraced the collateral registry, which would greatly assist the MSMEs, because often they may not have the credit, so this will assist them. Also, we've got other initiatives that the government has been working on, such as the prompt payment and the land allocation policy.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on reducing the gender gap. If I may follow up and ask, how have you been able to do that? What contributed to this?
Okay, thank you. I think it has got to do with, it all comes down to education, which is one of our priorities in the business community also. We've had, for example, SEPA, which was mostly cottage industry. It started out with mostly women in the cottage. So we promoted that. The government came up with a framework to accommodate women that were working from home in order to provide them with a platform also for making their goods available, be it through trade fairs that SEPA organized. So this was one way that we did it.
Great. As a matter of fact, Aisha was a little uncomfortable, I would say, being part of this panel, because as her, back in her office, it's the women who are majoritarily there in your office, and men are in minority. Yeah. So great. Thank you so much again for agreeing to be part of this panel. Let me move to Cyril from the Seychelles Chamber of Commerce. If I can request you to kind of highlight what role SCCI plays in terms of promoting SMEs, and also your engagement with various stakeholders actually within the...
Good afternoon all. Yes, good afternoon all. I just want to reset the context again. On the first day that I was on the panel, I was asked to talk about our role. And I think from the expression I had on Mrs. Apaya's face, she must have felt that who's that ignorant guy doing on my panel? But it was deliberate, because I was asked a question by Mr. Mumba about fishermen. Fishing in Seychelles should be the second pillar of our economy. I believe it should be first, but it is the second right now. And I'm representing the fishermen. And I've heard about blockchain, I've heard about sandboxes, I've heard about whatever. But to a fisherman, a blockchain is, since we surrounded by the seas, we've started fishing way back 1772. And a blockchain to us as fishermen is a block with a chain, described by Mr. Seto. And sandboxes, you've heard about FADs. That is fishing aggregated devices that they use to get the fish together. But in Seychelles, our FADs are sandboxes. It's a box of sand. We cut the fish and then we mix it, throw it out, attract the fish, comes to us. So I am not surprised that you guys, because I had a comment from my chairman, you didn't understand me. It was deliberate, because I don't understand you as well. Your blockchain is on my blockchain. Your sandboxes is on my sandboxes. Your fintech, I thought fintech was maybe some devices designed by a smart American, built by a Chinese, sold to us by an Indian, for us to catch shark, to get the fin, to send to China. So that is fintech. So this is why I deliberately, on that day, ignored additional question. And in fact, I was told by my chairman chickened out. He couldn't attend this thing. So when I was told I had to be on the panel about fintech, I went on World Bank side, obviously, to see what fintech is about. And I think the definition is to be a disruptive technology. So I said, I start by being disruptive. I will not attend your initial session, which I did not. I didn't give you my credential. That was deliberate, because I wanted to share something with you. At the end of the day, the user, whatever you guys design, whatever you guys do, it's the user who makes it work. And I'll give you an example. My background is telecommunication engineering. On the first day, I heard Mr. Jackson from MCB that what keeps him awake at night is that his network would hold. That the next day, his customer will not come back to him and tell him, give me my cash back. You see, you guys are talking about fintech. But in Seychelles, as far back as 2006 or 2004, I think, I was the head of business at Kebonwales. I was having a chat with the MD, and he was telling me, look, we've got a regional network, our bank, Madagascar, in Diego Suarez and Tana, I think Comoros at the time, Mayotte, La Réunion, Mauritius, and Mozambique. We want to link our network. But the problem is that the head office is in La Réunion, the French. Your company is British, and the British and the French do not talk to each other. So how can you help us with your network? I had two problems. My first problem was, it was not about designing the network for them. It was about convincing my boss, being British, that we should be able to go and compete with the French. It was France Telecom in La Réunion at the time. And convincing our bosses in London to sign off the check, because as the people from World Bank would know, in 2004, 5, 6, we had serious problem with foreign exchange in Seychelles. So the remit from the head office was, we don't have Forex for you guys. Survive on your own. So I had a chat with the MD from MCB, and I said, look, we can design a network. We're confident that we should be able to make it work for you. You pay for the service. You pay for the infrastructure. And they did. And my next problem was to go to La Réunion to convince the French manager that the British company is better than the French company, France Telecom at the time. So I went there, but before going there, I did my homework. Because in Seychelles, we were one of the first countries in this region to put VSAT network on the outer islands. And when I did my homework, France Telecom had no idea about VSAT network. So we pitched on that. We got the services. My only problem was that in the case, because as you know, La Réunion, Mauritius, Comoros, Madagascar are within the cyclone belt. How will this hold in the event of a cyclone? Because he was talking about business continuity. And we did some research about the wind speeds during a cyclone. So I said to my boss, I'm convinced the system we're going to put up is going to withstand any cyclone up until 210 kilometers per hour. Lo and behold, we got the contract. The first test came during the first year. There was a cyclone, and the wind speed was going to be 220 kilometers per hour. And our guys was in Seychelles. The support guy was in La Union. He couldn't go out. It was a cyclone. And as you know, you have to stir the dish when it comes to closer to the cyclone speed that can be held. And I had a text from the French manager to tell me, my friend, either you're going to be out of a job, I'm going to be out of a job, you're going to be held responsible because you told me it's going to withstand. And luckily, it got to 220. The specs was 210 or 220. And I had a call from my guys after the cyclone that passed over La Union that yes, it held, the network was okay, the bolt is starting to shift within the structure, but you're fine. You see, the reason I said this is that you guys are talking about blockchain, you guys are talking about new technologies. We have, Mr. Jackson, solution for your problem, for you to keep you asleep at night. Talk to a fisherman like me. I'll be able to support you. Now, in the context of SMEs, again, at the Chamber of Commerce, we've been asking about SMEs, the number of SMEs in Seychelles. How do you guys, we never had an answer. Yesterday, during the briefing, I told Aisha that, look, I'm on the panel tomorrow. I'm going to put you on the spot in front of World Bank that you guys don't have SMEs, a number. And I had a mail from her boss, Miss Anta, thank you very much. And lo and behold, I had figures I'm going to share with a gentleman on the panel as well. He's been asking for the figures. If you look at the figures that currently we have as SMB, we're contributing using the central bank GDP figures of last year. We're contributing close to 50 to 55% of the GDP. So you cannot ignore us. You cannot talk about technologies that we don't understand. Like I said on Monday, and I'm glad, I thought Minister would be here today, but his messenger's here, Mr. Payet, thank you. The challenge you're having within the SME is that the language you talk to us, both the technical guys and the policymakers, is the different challenge that we have. So the focus right now is not about getting financial technology to solve the problem, be it in fishing, be it in agriculture, the problem is to get the policies together. Yes, fintech would help us, like I've said in the case of the bank. And I've had the experience as well of working in Jamaica with Cable Wireless, and I provided fintech solution of Bank of Nova Scotia, a Canadian bank within the region. And at the time, I don't know if anybody knows about that, we used BlackBerry because at the time, BlackBerry on VPNs was the most secure network. So we had solution, we have solution, but the issue is that what the customer wants at the end of the day. And I don't know if you want me to continue, sir. I have a lot to say.
Thank you so much. But my question to you is, given we understand the limitations that SCCI is facing or the SMEs are facing within the entire ecosystem. Given these limitations, what is SCCI doing to develop SMEs to contribute further to the economy? If you can be brief, given
I will this time around. I commend the governor because we engaged with a team to sort of introduce SCCI members to what they're trying to do with regards to fintech. And we talk to our people, but again, and I can ask the question to any of the Seychelles or the Seychelles team here, any of you prepared to come and explain to a bunch of rowdy fishermen what fintech could do to their business? I'd be glad to see you after the break and pay some money. Because the challenge, sir, is not that right now. The challenge is to sort out the problems behind. I cannot get away from that because that's the issue right now in Seychelles. Yes, that would help, but the challenge is to sort out the issues that they have right now.
Great. So clearly understanding the language and translating it to the SMEs and the individuals is a challenge, and I'll come to the solutions actually. Thank you again, Mr. Cyril, for sharing your thoughts. I'll move to Mr. Lenar now. If you can share the experience of Estonia in terms of how the government and the important stakeholders within the economy came together to provide a platform both from a financial services and non-financial services to SMEs actually.
Thank you so much. In a sense, I would like to echo with a previous lament from the Chamber of Commerce. It has been extremely difficult, especially to listen to the concerns and voices from the small and medium-sized enterprises and startup companies because they are so diverse. And secondly, small companies don't have the vehicles like big companies with lawyers, auditors, PR, budgeting to communicate on the equal level with government and influence them. So it's a very tricky exercise to hear what your national economy, which stands in most countries on the small and medium-sized enterprises, is expecting. I would describe very briefly kind of the historic timeline of the focus of the digital transformation as we went through. In early 1990s, after regaining the independence from Soviet Union, we were focusing on one thing, how to get the mess which we inherited into some sort of independent national state and government. That was kind of the primary focus to get things working at least somehow. By year 2000, the primary focus was to put institutions, ministries, agencies to work and use ICT for internal benefit of the organization. After that, the focus shifted towards a government as a whole efficiency. But then something happened in 2007. The primary focus of all public administration reforms and e-government deployment became a productivity of end users and society. By introducing simple thing as digital signature, every Estonian citizen saves 5 working days every year by not using a paper bureaucracy. 5 working days means 2% of all your working time every year. If you are able to do a simple macroeconomic math, then you understand what it means to the labor productivity. By taking down the business registration is one thing only. You do it once, you register your business. This is a simple thing. But then what happens is a monthly bureaucracy which is non-productive for the businesses, especially once again for the small micro businesses. Annual reporting or monthly reporting to the tax department, by making that automated, pre-filled, we save to average Estonian small company 4 productive days per month. And this means that they can do something meaningful, something productive, and not deal with government bureaucracy. By removing or reshifting the licensing and license regulation process from the hotels and physiotherapists and other licensed activities which are full of society, we save them an annual time of 1 week per every licensed professional per year. And those are actually things which are right now in focus, because the productivity of the, especially for the small companies, has a biggest hit from the government bureaucracy processes. The second part, of course, kind of beyond that, becomes kind of the next layer. Productivity has a formula where you have revenues divided into your input, which is, if we can save money and save time for people to productive activities, then it's a question about the growth, the revenue growth. If your revenue is close to 0, then there is no point of dealing with a non-existing problem of removing the bureaucracy. So the focus on the growth side. And this is where the digital government becomes a crucial one, and other sectors will follow. We did not invent the digital government solutions to enable Fintech sector or to enable real-time economy or transit, but they are all benefiting from that. And right now, without government intervention, without creating special regulations, and in some cases we might say because of the geopolitical location, Estonian Financial Supervisory Authority is especially careful with our eastern neighbor Russia money laundering attempts, and we have a 10 times higher focus on AML, and our financial authorities or financial institutions actually struggle with that. They understand that they need to play according to the rules because there is just 100 kilometers away from you is €500 billion of euros that is looking for the ways to get washed. And this is a big attempt to also to ruin your stability. So without having a flexible regulatory environment, Estonia has become, thanks to the digital government, a very different spot. Right now, the average number of startups per capita in Europe is 5 startups per 100 persons. Estonia has a 6 times higher number. We have actually right now 32 startups per capita, which is among top 3 on the planet Earth. And our capital raised, and once again, it's not a local capital, it's a global capital which moves where it's wanted and when it has the ability to grow. Capital is not moving some places where it's not wanting and when it's not having an ability to grow. So the move of the foreign direct investments as a seed capital to Estonian startups is even higher than in Israel. So it's 350 euros per Estonian citizen, which is annually invested to Estonian startup companies. And this has nothing to do really with financial supervisory authority, fintech regulations, and despite that, there are 2 unicorns in the fintech area, which are based in Estonia, founded by Estonians, operated by Estonians, and of course, their primary markets are, of course, not Estonia. Their primary markets are India, in many cases China, African continent, Southern America. Mexico is a leading market for fintech companies based, founded, and started from Estonia. And once again, the process of government of putting end user first, not an institutional efficiency of my ministry, by the efficiency of the end user, a regular citizen, small micro company manager, and the owners of the small companies gives a highest return on any dollar, any euro put to the government IT systems than we can ever imagine.
Thank you so much, Leonard. You talked about 2 key points here. One is the issue of creating a friction-free environment for small businesses. Second is in terms of easing the capital raising requirements, actually. So I'll give you a brief perspective of Seychelles here. And again, I took the data from Central Bank of Seychelles survey, actually. Unlike other economies, Seychelles is relatively well placed in terms of access to finance for SMEs. And if you talk to SMEs and ask them what are the major challenges that they face, the first major challenge they face is related to administrative issues. This is related to the paperwork, this is related to the KYC, bureaucracy, so on and so forth. Second is application process. Third is approval process. So it takes anywhere between 4 to 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, for a loan application to get processed and to get the loan. So it's the loan is there, like people, and if you look at the various sources through which SMEs have borrowed loans, informal sources do not figure. It is the formal source. It's either the commercial bank or the development bank of Seychelles, so on and so forth. So it's the first part of the process, actually, that is the main challenge, if I understood correctly, through the survey, Governor. So and if I'll turn with that thought, I'll turn to Bank of Thailand, Mr. Thirawat. we'll talk about the issues on the process, but from a capital raising standpoint, what are the innovations that are happening in Thailand specifically and broadly within the region? Actually, if you can take us through that.
Thank you. Thank you, Giyas. You mentioned about the application problem. In Thailand, we also face the same problem because the SME have to submit a lot of application to a lot of banks without the standardized form. The Bank of Thailand will soon introduce the infrastructure that we will call it the application matching platform. From after we launch this platform, SME can go to only this platform and fill out only one application. After they fill out the application, the system will match this application with the banks or service providers that are in the system. Afterward, if any bank can accept this SME profile, then the SME can further contact with the banks. You will see that this system will reduce the search cost for the SME. While the system also match the SME profile with other government scheme like credit guarantee scheme, government soft loan, and so on. This is the first problem that we use the technology to solve. The second one that we use the technology to solve, we call it the electronic factoring platform. You know, SME always face the problem that they don't have collateral. Actually, the SME has collateral, but in non-traditional form, like purchase order or invoice. After we launch the system, the SME can post the invoice or purchase order on the platform. This platform open to everyone that register to the system to bid, to offer the discount rate for each particular invoice or purchase order. Then from past day that the SME have to do a factoring with a particular bank, they can get the rate which may be not good from that bank. They can now post their invoice on the platform, and they will get the market decided discount rate from the platform. This platform is also solve the problem of double financing, because the platform will verify the invoice, or in some country like in Mexico or India, they also ask the buyer of the SME goods to verify the platform, to verify the invoice or purchase order. Then into a country, they call it the reverse factoring platform. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Thirawat. So if I may ask, who owns this platform, and what is the role of the central bank in terms of facilitating this platform? That's one. And second is, how is the take-up of this platform in terms of the number of loans processed, or the, the amount through this platform, so on and so forth? If you have some insights on that.
There's a lot of business model for this platform, like in India. The entity that set up the platform is the exchange. And in Mexico, the entity that set up the platform is the specialized financial institution. But in Thailand, the Bank of Thailand will in association with the bank association to set up the platform.
Mm-hmm. There's no ownership of the platform in itself, but you play a governance role, is it?
We will talk about this about the share later on. That we want to start the platform first, then we sell shares to those, or even the government. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Thirawat. Let me come to Aisha Now that you provided a good context and what is the ministry doing, the department doing, can you, in your opinion, in terms of your engagement with the various stakeholders and also the SMEs, highlight key challenges apart from the ones that Cyril already highlighted?
Okay. The MSME sector, they face various challenges ranging from the cost of doing business to utilities, operation space, but access to credit is a key challenge that they've faced. This ranges from the interest rate, the time it takes, as mentioned by my colleague, to process applications, and cost and fees that comes with it, and the collateral.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is where Fintech could probably step in and offer a solution, a cost-effective solution to businesses. I will, perhaps as Mr. Bonham has highlighted the plight of fishermen, I will go in that line. Okay, we know fishermen spend most of their time out at sea. They don't have time to be going back and forth to the bank. So easy solution that Fintech offers is a one-day application. You apply online, you submit online, and you don't have to go back and forth at the bank. And also AI, artificial intelligence, reduces the cost of making credit decisions. So it takes less time for your application to process. And also we've got the crowdfunding options, which is quite attractive because your idea may not attract traditional, conventional investors. But on the other hand, you can get your funding from another investor online. However, we have to be mindful that although it offers attractive solution, it does come with its challenges such as the alternative data sources, cybersecurity, and also vulnerability of consumers. Is the pricing worth the risk? These are all elements that I think we need to keep in mind. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Let me open up the floor now and engage with the audience. So, how many like financial sector players, banks, financial service providers do we have here in the audience? No one? You don't want to be on the spot? Hi, if I may engage with you, one key point that Cyril raised was on the point of listening to the customers. So in your engagement with the SMEs, what has been your endeavor in terms of listening to the customers and developing products that meet their needs? So if you can share your thoughts from a banking financial institution perspective, it will be really great.
Good morning. I'm CEO of the Seychelles Commercial Bank, local bank here in the Seychelles. Yes, we do deal a lot with the SMEs, and I know these are the common concerns that come up all the time, the access to credit and the amount of paperwork, which is true. There is quite a bit of forms and documents to be submitted, which sometimes what we find is that documents are submitted by piecemeal. If we go again with the example of the fishermen, for example, you have to take time with them to explain the process, the procedure, and the requirement. And yes, I suppose if a fisherman can sit on their boat and just log in their application, this would be a speedy process for them. But in terms of, because what was also highlighted before with regards to actually from the time a loan is approved also, for them to access the money, it takes a longer time because there's a whole process. It's not just the bank. We also rely on, for example, with registration of the security, which actually takes a long time. It's something that we've been working closely with the central bank to try and work on closing the gap in terms of the turnaround time for registration of collateral. And this is where the how we call it, the digital security registration of the first attempt here is with regards to pledge documents, for example, which is something that is being worked on by the central bank and with the local department of technology. And if this comes in place, yes, this will speed up in terms of application. And if we have a lot more of such initiative whereby registration of collateral can be done online, it will speed up. So on the bank side, we do have our own internal system in place, but like I say, there's all the other elements of it that we have to put it together to make it more effective.
Thank you. Thank you. If I may ask you, sir, a question, what initiative is your institution taking to reduce the processing time within your limits, actually?
We are actually, I am from Al Salam Bank. We are actually a new entrant into the banking ecosystem here. We were an offshore, and a few months back only we have come into the domestic sector. Definitely what you are telling, that the timing is of essence when a credit has to be granted. And if it is 4 months or 5 months, definitely the purpose gets defeated. For SME, as we all know, they do not have do not have that much financial this acumen to prepare the financial statements and all those. Definitely the banks, we here need to cut short on the requirements, our requirements for SMEs. For SMEs also, we think that if we are working on it, but maybe it will take some time, some scoring model sort of thing. Instead of asking for the financials and all those, a scoring model, scheme-specific thing, certain schemes with a scoring model where we do not ask from them a lot of documents. And the third thing, because the collateral issue also comes into play, banks will always like to, commercial banks will always like to see that the funds are safe. And for small loans, maybe sometimes if they have a big property, it doesn't make sense to have that much. If there is from the government side or something, a credit guarantee corporation or something, maybe a part of the exposure, suppose 40% or 50% is guaranteed by that, this will also give a big fillip to the SME financing in Seychelles. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your thoughts. Let me, you wanted to?
I'd like to comment. You see, again, the answers that I hear is that you guys want fishermen to fill in papers. They don't even know themselves what to fill in. They just want to go out there and get a fish. And Alex, I'll give you an example. There was a platform, it was announced 2 years ago by the government that they're going to put an auction platform with a digital payment as well connected to that. So that the fishermen, when they come in the auction, maximize their catch, the money they get from their catch. Because I know that fishermen in Seychelles, they go out there, it's tough, like Aisha was saying, the sea's rough, the sun is hot. When they come, they want their cash within 2 hours. And you come and tell them, auction, I'll give you your money in 2 days. It never took off.
That's where the solution that
it has, yes, but it won't take off in Seychelles because you have to.
Why do you say that? Let me challenge.
No, but you see, they offered it because they have to put in something.
Pardon me. Why do you say that it will not take off?
Because they, in their minds, a team from EU came to Seychelles. They took a product somewhere, I don't know from where. They say, okay, we're going to auction. You're going to get a guy's going to get a lot of money, but we'll pay you tomorrow morning. The guy said, them, forget it. And it never took off. Am I right, Mr. Payet? It never took off. But it's a good idea because at the end of the day, these guys will make more money because the fresher the fish, the higher the price. But they can afford to wait for an auction, to them give me my money. So you have to change that mindset. We go back to, we have to educate. We're not good at that in Seychelles. But at the same time, if we do the education, I take the case of mobile network in Seychelles. When I was a regulator, I used to be a gamekeeper as well, I was a regulator, we told Cable Wireless, they had the monopoly, to put in a mobile network in Seychelles. They said no. I said, why? It's going to cost us so much money, you can have only 100 subscribers. That was in 1994 or 95, I think. I don't know if Mr. Weber is in the house, he was the principal secretary. They said no. We had to force them to put in a network. And you've heard the statistics right now. Seychelles has got 2 mobiles. I don't know why I have 2 mobiles. One for the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the boyfriend. I'm not sure. But I tell you, we are early adopters. But the challenge is we don't then go down and maximize the benefits. That's the problem. It will work if we go and educate. You see, I admire the governor. She's doing everything and the young team she has to make it happen. And I believe in Seychelles. I believe we can make it. Pay them well, by the way. Don't give them peanuts because they go away.
Let's stick to the point.
Going back to your
Cyril,
question.
If I may ask you, as SCCI, what is SCCI doing to address the key challenges that you yourself?
You see, we go back to our constituent. We tell them, look, you guys, if you go to the bank, you have to make sure you should be able to pay back to the bank. So we try to educate them as well. It's a long process, as you know, because the mindset in the past, all these were very political. I mean, there are things that maybe you're not told, but it's a fact. In the past, I used to go to the bank. If I'm well connected, I get a deal. If not, I don't pay, no problem. But as you know, we can't go in like that in Seychelles. So we try to educate our customers. Look, guys, you need the bank to work with you, you have to pay them. So we try to educate them. But at the same time, we are a small institution. By the way, I'm doing that for free. You have to give me some money advising your governor. We're doing that for free. Because there's only 12 of us. We try to get each sector. But at the same time, if the ministry, the bankers, try and go down to these guys and talk to them. But it's not happening. I know because I've been working with these guys. You go down to the port, you sit with them, you talk to them. What they hear from what we are trying to provide is not what they want right now. So we have to change that mindset. Okay. You have to educate them. We're doing our bit, but we're a small team.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Education and capacity building is one area that needs to be worked on. If I can come to the lady in the house again. What is your suggestion in terms of engaging with the stakeholders, in terms of the ministries, departments, and also with the SMEs actually? I see that there are some challenges and issues. So going forward, what do you suggest should be done, in your opinion?
Okay. I believe that consultation is very important. And education, as Mr. Bonham has highlighted. For us, we make it a priority that we do consult all our stakeholders whenever we're drafting policies to ensure that the policies address the key issues that they are facing. So for us, this is significant. And the future is digital, so fintech is here to stay. We take note that there are impediments that perhaps the traditional sector faces to service the SME sector, and fintech is definitely the solution to address that gap.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me again open the floor for questions. Do you have any questions for representatives from Seychelles? Or, yeah, Ramiz and the gentleman at the back. If anyone can.
Afi. I knew that some of the African countries as well as some specific islands, women, they cannot own the property. So it's an impediment for taking the loans from the banks. So financial inclusion is disrupted here, and it is a prime cause for gender disparity in the SME sectors also. So what about the Seychelles? Can women can own the property, like land property and other property?
Please go ahead.
Okay. As highlighted earlier, we are fortunate here in Seychelles that we don't have that issue. Women are not really marginalized, and access to credit
It's the other way around, is it?
Yes. I mean...
Yeah, please go ahead.
Right, so this is, access to credit is not really an issue in Seychelles for women.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was checking the website of the Development Bank of Seychelles. On the main web page, there were like the photo of the staff. 36 of them, 6 men and 30 women. 1:5 is the ratio. So yeah, congratulations for that. So can we go to the gentleman at the back, please? Can someone hand him? Okay, you already have.
Like I spoke yesterday, my name is Divino Sabino. I spoke yesterday wearing my lawyer hat, but I wear other hats as well. I am a board member of the Seychelles Credit Union. I'm also the vice chancellor of the Seychelles Chamber of Commerce. I take note that my colleague said that our chairman chickened out. I might have to report my colleague, the chairman. But my intervention today is more to pass some comments rather than to ask a question to the panelists. First, I just want to support a lot of the things that my colleague, Mr. Bonham, has said. There's a lot of frustration within the private sector with regards to policies and how things are working in the background, that we cannot really focus our attention on fintech. It's like with regards to fintechs, we're all asking ourselves, what kind of cherry shall we put on the cake? But in the private sector, we're asking ourselves, is there even a cake in the first place to put that cherry on? I think, for example, I want to highlight two issues, maybe that's more relevant to the banking sector and SMEs. I think my colleagues from the two banks spoke later on about delays with regards to registration of collateral and securities. This is a big problem in the country. It's something that the Chamber of Commerce has mentioned publicly. It's something that the Bar Association Seychelles are quite frustrated about. We have banks with small businesses who have amongst themselves agreed for a loan facility. Maybe that takes a few days, maybe that takes a few weeks. But before the bank can issue the funds to the business or the potential business, the bank wants its security to be registered officially. Now, in an ideal world, that should take maybe 1 day. In my mind, it should take 1 day. Maybe a few days, who knows? But maybe I should say it should in an ideal world, it should take 1 working day. So let's not count the weekends. But how long does it take? You will have noticed that my colleague from the other bank mentioned 4 or 5 months. That's how it happens. It could be that a loan has been approved in principle. Right now, today, the bank is ready to give the small business the loan, but it will take 4 or 5 months for the Registrar General's office to register the papers in order for the bank to be able to give the loan. My estimates right now is that there must be around maybe 200 million rupees of approved loans not yet disbursed, and that's equivalent to about 15 million US dollars for foreign visitors. That's sitting in banks rather than being filtered out into the economy. Delays caused by, I would say, unnecessary bureaucracy on the part of the Registrar General's office. Okay, so that's my point with regards to delays with issuing of loans. I also want to raise the fact about the contrasting policies of government. We have on the one hand the government telling banks, give
please
loans.
Please allow me to interrupt you. In the interest of time, if you can quickly make
okay,
your
I'll
point.
I'll do this in under a minute. For example,
your time
okay,
starts
30
now.
seconds. Okay. We have, for example, the government telling banks and credit unions give cheap loans to small businesses. At the same time, we see the government issuing government bonds. So here's me, a banking institution, saying, should I give a risky 9% loan to this guy who wants to start up his business? I might not get my money back, or I might not get much of it back, versus a nice, cushy 6% government bond. Almost guaranteed. I'm guaranteed that I'm going to get my 6% from the money I put in the government bond, versus taking a risk of giving a fisherman a 9% loan. Where will I put my money? Where will you put your money if you were in charge of that money? Thank you. That's my intervention.
Thank you so much. Any other final thoughts and comments from the floor? You're good? Great. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, please allow me to conclude this session, summarizing key takeaways. Again, there's a need to get back to the basics and go bottom up, listen to the SMEs, the customers, and try to build the products based on their needs. There is access to capital, but what seems to be the issue is the quality of the financial services in terms of collateral requirements, in terms of the interest rate in itself, and also one key thing that came out is the process it takes, the time it takes for the entire process, right from the application to the dispersal of loan. Another key thing that came out is on the aspect of capacity building. So we may have cutting edge technology tools to offer financial services and non-financial services to the SMEs, but there is a need to get them on board to train them in terms of using these services effectively. With that, as we develop the fintech strategy for the Seychelles, let us ensure that we keep these issues in mind. With that thought, a round of applause for the panelists, please, for sharing their views passionately. Thank you. Over to the MC. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giaz and panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, we are nearing the end of this 2.5-day workshop. But before we conclude, it is important that we highlight the main findings and recommendations which will take us forward. Ms. Brinda Dabising, Senior Financial Sector Specialist at the World Bank Group, will be moderating the plenary session. Brinda?
So we have reached the last session of the last day, and this is the last plenary session. And I have with me guests, panelists who need no introduction, but nonetheless, I have at my left Mr. Patrick Payet, Secretary of State for the Ministry of Finance, Trade, Investment and Economic Planning. To his left, Mr. Douglas Pierce, Practice Manager, World Bank Group. And then Mr. Norbert Mumba, Alliance for Financial Inclusion, Mrs. Caroline Abel, Governor of the Central Bank, and Mrs. Zainab Daman, Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the Seychelles FSA. So I think it is now opportune to quote at this moment from one of my favorite authors, which is Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who said, et si c'était par la fin que tout recommençait? What if the end is just an excuse for a new beginning? So we are here. We have heard so many things over the past 3 days. We have been reminded over and over again of a few thoughts that would guide the development of the strategy and the development of how Seychelles will implement the strategy. But how did this all begin? How did the workshop begin? It began with a movie. And in that movie, we saw Seychellois talking to us. They said something which we hope we have not forgotten. Then we heard and learned from our distinguished guests who came from very far to these shores to share with you what they have been doing in other countries and in other areas where Fin meets tech. They have told us about the opportunities that fintech can bring. They have guided us on how, what dangers could wait for you guys ahead. They've given tips on how to make this happen, especially to the early 40 plus in the room. And so now we have to gather all the pieces together and create the puzzle. So I will now turn to my distinguished panelists to gather from each one of them one piece of this whole. And I'll first turn to Secretary of State to ask you, so on day one, we heard that fintech is not a gadget per se. It is a process. It is useful, it has some value in it, and the focus should be on solving a problem. So what problem is Seychelles trying to solve?
Thank you, Brinda, and a very good afternoon to all. When, let's take in the context of Seychelles, at the end of the day, we need to see that any development that is done, especially in regards to the fintech or IT infrastructure, it goes back to the end user. What does, or what our end user want at the end of the day from us? If, for example, we take the government services that are being provided, they want to see something that at least when things are processed or the forms that are given to them, they are user-friendly, they can be processed in a speedy manner, and it can be accepted in a manner where even though we have all of these regulatory framework in place, but at the end of the day, they are able to receive the service a bit faster and a bit affordable as well. There has been a lot of discussion in regards to the costs of doing business. In the context of Seychelles, when you maybe get businesses, we've just discussed about the issue of online registry just before the panelists. And the 200 million out there that are not being used into the economy. These are some of the costs of doing business in Seychelles. And I think these are things that people want to see to be improved. And this is what I'm saying in the domestic market. But at the end of the day, people needs to, the mindset needs to change as well. There's a mindset change that needs to be done, not just in the government, but in the private sector as well, because it's a win-win situation at the end of the day within the two parties. And there is an element of trust because all of the issue of cybersecurity, data protection, protection of the consumer as well needs to come in. So the element of trust as well needs to be there. People need to see the regulatory environment in their favor as well at the end of the day. And if you go back into the financial, in the international forum, because things are moving, and Seychelles needs to move as well. And the whole issue of, Cyril mentioned about the fishermen, the fishing sector wants to be the first pillar of the economy. What about the financial sector? They want to be the first pillar of the economy as well. So, but in Seychelles, we need to diversify the economy. So the whole element of the competitive environment in Seychelles needs to be there for us to be able to attract all the FDI or people to come to Seychelles, even the tourists. The tourists are coming in Seychelles, but if you don't have an IT platform, the fintech platform, that are able to ease their holidays, it will be a time consuming for them. So these are a few issues, I think, the problems that us, Seychelles, but we need to do it not just in isolation by the government, but with the private sector on board as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. So if I understand you correctly, so this system has to be user-centric with the user, the customer at the center of all development. So let me now turn to the ladies. I mean, during the various talks that we have had the opportunity to listen to, there seems to be a lot out there. And we have tried to bring a lot in here. So we have, I mean, it has been established that there is a lot that the Seychelles need to understand. End users need to understand it. But how about the regulators? Have you been able to gather, has this workshop been useful for you to be able to gather some elements on how you would approach this in your journey? I'll ask the governor to reply to me on that.
Thank you, Brenda, and good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to express our thanks for the vast amount of information that has been given out of this workshop, which will definitely help us on this road to produce the national strategy. From the perspective of the central bank, definitely we've gathered quite an amount of insights, which were already part of the conversation that we were already having internally and also with our stakeholders. First of all is about the balance between regulation and flexibility to innovate. As Liz exposed in her presentation on Wednesday, we want to be technology neutral. So we want a framework. At the beginning, we highlighted the sandbox approach, but we were very interested by the formula that was expressed by a colleague from Dubai. So definitely, when we look at how we did with the case of Airtel Money, definitely we used the channel that the Dubai framework, because we didn't have, we don't have until now a sandbox framework, but we use the current regulation to try and help the company. Definitely we need to have dedicated resources to work with fintech entrepreneurs, because if we want them to emerge, they need to be aware that resources will be available to them. And one aspect that central bank put a lot of emphasis on is capacity building. If we want to understand this environment, we need to be able to train our people and reskill our staff. And one element that we have introduced in the central bank starting last year, apart from our normal scholarship that we provide our staff, we've introduced a competitive scholarship where we recognize the emerging elements, and we put that scholarship, we don't direct it to anybody, but an individual who feels that they want to go in that direction, put down their application, and the first recipient of this scholarship has been Nicholas, and we are very happy in what we are seeing in terms of his engagement in that direction. Definitely we need to engage with partners, because we will never, any one of us, we will never be able to do this alone. And this is why at the start of this process, we've engaged the World Bank and AFI and other central banks to learn from them, because we need to understand what has worked, what is not working, and how we exchange with each other. Being the institution that has the mandate for financial stability, this remains at the heart of what we do. So whilst we embrace new innovation, we cannot compromise on that aspect. And one issue, and I think came out very strongly from the guidance of Central Bank of Ghana, is we don't want necessarily to copy what other jurisdictions are doing. And there I echo what Secretary of State have just said. We need to be able to deliver what the users want. And this is why for us, at the start of this workshop, it was important that we show what the public today is expressing in terms of what are the challenges that they are facing and what we should be doing about those challenges. And we need to set out clear objectives in this fintech framework, and for us as regulators, it definitely has to come out very clear. The other element that for us is important is data protection. And we are working already with the ICT to improve the data protection legislation that exists. But we also need to be cognizant that there is an access to information legislation that already exists. So if there are any elements that can contradict, we need to make sure that we iron them out. And also in light of this innovative environment, we've been conscious that we need to have a financial services consumer protection. And again, here we are receiving the support of the World Bank with that, and we are working with FSA. And we currently have a first draft, which is currently under review, and hopefully by this year, we should be able to go with the National Assembly for debate. And definitely other elements of data protection comes on consent of customers, disclosures and transparency. And also we need to create awareness, because it's important that the end users know what the issues are. For us, the other element comes with all the security issues, cybersecurity, AML, fraud. Coordination needs to exist between authorities. For us, this is very important, between regulators, law enforcement. And we also feel that capacity building of regulators, law enforcement, prosecutors, and judiciary. Again, like for the AML, we are very happy that we are getting the support of the World Bank in having a 2-year program where all these agencies will be captured so that we elevate everybody at the same level. International cooperation, because if we are talking about financial innovation, money are moving between borders. So we need to have international cooperation, and we need to make sure that our legislations are up to date when they need to be updated. We also look at disclosure and transparency, and especially how we can use technology in our supervisory approach. On our side, we are currently developing inside programs to digitize and automate our supervisory reporting process. We want to have a holistic approach to reporting, because currently in the central bank we have various divisions requesting information from financial institutions, so we want to have a better coordination and perhaps have one platform where institutions can submit their information. We also want to work with banks to integrate their reporting requirements with us. And this whole relook of the current reporting framework should reduce the burden on banks, because the more reporting they have, it also distracts them to providing services to their clients. In terms of transparency, we are increasing our disclosures in terms of market information because we want participants to understand the supervisory expectations. We also want to make public our supervisory actions, because today if an action is taken against a bank in particular, it's between us and the bank. The public is not made aware that there is a sanction of a bank. So we want to do that going forward to enhance market discipline. We want to increase our consultation with banks as we develop policies, legislation. We are currently doing it, but more on the legislative side. But when it comes to technical work, this is the effort that we have started now. And we are increasing information through new publications so that there is more information out there. In terms of the issue of crypto domestically, this is an area that perhaps we differ in terms of view compared to my colleague on my left. From the central bank perspective, we've taken it as an asset. Perhaps it's something that when we work on the strategy, we need to come to a common ground, because like Alain said yesterday, we need to be coherent and consistent. This is something that is very important for any jurisdiction. But already local customers are using such assets, so we cannot discredit that this thing is happening. It's just how it's taken on board. So what has to happen is we need to empower and educate our population on this aspect, especially on the risk, because most of the time people enter into things without taking on board risk, and then they come to us and say, what should I do now when something has gone wrong? So we need to make sure that they understand fully. And this is going to enter as part of our education campaign, which is already underway. And then the other aspects which I've already taken on board is on the supervisory process, where new technologies should reduce the amount of human resources that we need, and then they can have more time to do more analysis and other work. So these are some of the areas that, whilst we had taken them on board, but has be some more insights have come out of the workshop, which will help us in the strategy.
Thank you, Governor. So I'll pass on the floor to Zainab. So how has this workshop been useful? What are the takeaways?
Thank you, Brenda. Good morning, everyone. On the side of the FSA as a regulator for the non-banking financial services sector, us as well, we are seeing a lot of developments in terms of the sphere of fintech, regtech, even insurance tech and so on. And as well, interest has been mounting in terms of blockchain technology, cryptocurrencies, bitcoins. So and the FSA, we geared towards innovations. We are aware that there are developments are happening quickly. So we want as well to get on the bandwagon and try to see what are the different opportunities there are out there for us to explore and provide our end users with options in terms of new business, new development technologies, and so on. So And we have started actually internally to start exploring all these various options. And efforts has been made, great efforts has been made in terms of looking at our regulatory framework, exploring sandboxes. And through this workshop, we've seen that, of course, there's no one structure fits all. There are various options that out there that different jurisdictions they are engaging into or exploring. And for us, as we move forward in terms of these innovations, we see at the FSA, we're seeing that there is a real need for us to relook and evaluate our business strategy. So, which is geared, of course, towards development, but also with cognizance of regulatory needs and regulatory requirements. Because as a regulator, with our focus, we have to abide in line with requirements of various international standards, and there are quite a lot of pressures on small island states and regulators like Seychelles for us to comply with international standards. So whilst we are much focused on innovations, we do have a balance in terms of regulation, and we are aware in the undertaking of our different research, we are aware of and mindful of various aspects of risks that are heightened through all these different technological advancement that is coming to our shores. So, and the risks are varied. We've learned the number of risks. It can be systemic, it can be operational, cybersecurity, it's something that we've heard over the last 2 days as well. So data breaches, and the FSA, taking all that in parallel, we at the FSA, we want to work with our partners, the stakeholders, ensure that there is this collaboration. And I'm happy to hear through this workshop that there is a national initiative out there for Seychelles to move towards implementing this fintech development and technology for Seychelles. So we want to be a player on that as well, and as we're pushing our mandate in terms of non-banking services as well, we're willing to collaborate and share as well our researchers, whatever findings that we found, bring it to the panel, and so that we can work towards a common goal for Seychelles, developing business for Seychelles. And also, the Secretary of State and the Governor, I will echo what they said in terms of continuous collaboration. Training as well is important, and at the FSC as well, a lot of emphasis has been put in terms of training and developments for our staff, for them to be able to collaborate and talk to their end users, our clients, at that level. Basically understanding the whole realm of fintech, understanding what it's all about, and being able to, going forward, implement new innovations for the development of the non-banking financial sector of Seychelles.
Thank you very much, Zainab. So if I hear you ladies, and this is to the gentlemen in the room, so fintech is not the cherry on the cake, it's an ingredient. So this is how I would summarize this. So I'll turn to Norbert. So you are from the AFI, you are outside the box, and if you were to take a helicopter view of what has been going on during these past 3 days and what is going on internationally, what would be your friendly guidance to the Seychellois?
Thank you very much, and is it afternoon now? Afternoon, I guess. Firstly, I need to commend you for 2 things. The first one is that for the 2.5 days being bombarded with all these technologies, and you still are able to internalize them, and you are still standing today. That's really great. And the second one is that you're very brave to leave your fate in my hands in trying to summarize the last 2 days. But that said, very quickly, and it's not about testing age here, just very quickly, who has actually in this room seen a typewriter work? Typewriter, right? And who in this room knows a product that is related to the typewriter called Tipex?
Yes.
Okay, the numbers are reducing, right? And who in this room actually knows what Tipex was doing or was meant to do? They're even getting less. Then finally, who in this room knows what has replaced Tipex? Sorry? Spell check, cut and paste. What else? Backspace. So, what else? Delete. Right. I'm trying to, like Nicholas say, ask you to come back to the basics. Before, for those who never saw the typewriter work, if you made a mistake, you got this Tipex, and which was like ink, you went over the word. Then there was another development to the Tipex. When you put the ink, you could stick a little piece of paper on top of it and type on top of that, you know, whatever you wanted to correct. But technology came with backspace, delete, copy and paste, cut, and so forth. But what did it do? At the bottom line is that it made us more efficient. It brought quality to work. Even if you did 10 drafts, nobody sees how bad the first one was. They just look at the final version. Now, if we sort of like draw that analogy and see what fintech has got to do, and also I'm very glad that I started off with the fish example and we seem to have ended on the fish example. But that's a typical area where two things are coming out, that if we have identified the challenges, there's a way of resolving these challenges, and also there's a way that we can leverage technology to resolve these challenges. So if you ask me the question, moderator, that what do I see as the key ingredients or key takeaways from this? First of all, our mandate is smart policy making, you know, bringing smart policies to life. So I will focus on those policy interventions that we seem to see. The first policy intervention is, of course, there seems to be room for cooperation and coordination within the Seychelles. So we need maybe to relook whatever structures we have that are enabling this coordination between FSA, between the ministry and so forth, to perhaps you are members of AFI, you've seen national models where everybody sort of operates on a coordinated platform, each with very clear deliverables in that space. And from here onwards, our takeaway would be there's still further work in terms of maybe establishing a baseline, like in the SME sector, establishing a baseline in terms of where the SME is, what are their challenges, and how we hope this could be resolved. Then coming to the next point, which would be the clear policy front. First, we had sandboxes, test and learn approach, and so forth. We have also to relate it to key figures that came out throughout the discussion. First, your level of inclusiveness is already extremely high, so your focus is not access. Your focus seems to be on usage. Then secondly, the rate of literacy of the Seychelles, which is, I think, sitting somewhere around 95.3% and so forth, is also extremely high by international standards. So we can leverage that. Then also the population, which is sitting at 85,000 or thereabout, rather than mourn about the small population in terms of scale of services and so forth, there's an upside to it that we see, which is that industry can easily turn into export-oriented industry, because local demand can easily be satisfied at 85%. Now, if we go in that line, then we start to look at the possible policy interventions. It's very clear that the SME front is key to the economy. Therefore, a holistic SME ecosystem, maybe similar if we exchange notes for the future, like similar to the Malaysia situation, which will address greenfield SMEs, will address those bigger SMEs up to resolution and so forth. That complete ecosystem is very important. Then we don't lose sight of what I think Dr. Seto hammered on yesterday, and also Nicholas in his interventions also hammered on, is that what in the fintech space are we trying to resolve? What are the national aspirations in terms of the goals going forward in the country, so that we marry the space we are going to play in with those national aspirations? Are you do you want to be a Dubai, or are you first going to take care of the domestic enterprise and individuals and so forth? Then when it comes to also scaling up, we also see the G2P payments and P2G payments as absolutely critical to try and boost the numbers in terms of the population-wise. What we mean is that government payments, government-related services, utility services, maybe need to start to come on these platforms that are being created in order to reach scales. That also requires policy interventions. And to the tail end, I would agree with you. You did raise a number of points regarding the need to develop industry. But I think there are also important lessons that we can see in terms of leveraging technology. I think the issue that came from the Chamber of Commerce is value chains, and we've seen examples where value chains can add. The Bank of Thailand example is absolutely key on the SME front. I think what that does is that one application, first, it also fosters competition among the financial sector players. But more importantly, it's all like online. Then secondly, the SME does not have to waste time, assuming they are not accepted by this bank. They don't have to waste time to start redoing all the documents according to how this new bank wants. But the same documentation will just be picked up by another players. And then, of course, we had warehousing, invoicing, and so forth as possible options. My appeal to the private sector is, yeah, we we have to, we are part and parcel of the change process. Government and government-related industry can do the policy interventions, but at the end of the day, we must leave the private sector to innovate. I think it's not really the role of government to drive innovation. The role of government is to provide the enabling environment, and then we leave the private sector to innovate. They will always play in the space if the regulatory and policy environment thing. I think Learned Council did allude to the registration process of title and so forth, for collateral and so forth. That is absolutely key if we are to do go up further on the ease of doing business. We have to address, and again, technology could be a key driver in trying to cut through those bureaucratic processes, if you can sit. And then I also get the sense that we may need to strengthen. I'm not too sure whether I heard much about the movable collateral registry. I don't know if you have, but it looks like that's an area that you. So in totality, I would look at innovative regulatory approaches as being absolutely key, and of course, you don't want to do all this and at the end of the day be taken down as a non-compliant jurisdiction. Yeah. So your AML, CFT, your cybersecurity is going to be absolutely key through the process.
Thank you
Those
very
are my
much.
takeaways,
No,
moderator.
but thank you very much. Yeah. So I pass on now to Doug. I mean, the needs for Seychelles seem to go beyond what is encapsulated by the Africa Digital Moonshot. So I would like to ask you, how do you think Seychelles should articulate the way forward, and how the bank, the World Bank, can help them in achieving it?
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to say how much of a privilege it is for us in the World Bank to be invited to work together with the government, the central bank, private sector, in this exciting challenge of determining what Seychelles' priorities are and how to best benefit from. The Secretary of State was highlighting that fintech needs to be something that benefits everyone, individuals, firms. So in this process of determine what are the constraints, what are the priorities, what are the objectives and goals that Seychelles wants to set, and then what are the actions that each set of counterparts needs to take, it is something which is, I think, as Norbert was saying, needs to be a collaborative process, needs to be a well-coordinated process. So the Fishermen's Association, the hotels industry, the Department of ICT, everyone has a role to play in this. Because, again, as the Minister of Finance said, the entire population needs to get on board in order for there to be a thriving fintech ecosystem. Also, very happy to be working closely with AFI. It's always a pleasure to be working closely with AFI in this engagement. So going back to Brenda's question, I think the digital economy moonshot is still very ambitious, and I think the fact that Seychelles is doing a process of a diagnostic around the enabling foundations of digital economy, including digital financial services, is perfect timing, and that can feed into the fintech strategy. And just for just to share for interest, there's a comprehensive range of areas that are going to be highlighted there. Connectivity is still not quite what it needs to be. Data costs are quite high relatively here, and these are fundamental constraints. In South Africa, we work with partners there, and just the cost of data is one of the constraining factors to innovation and fintech. Okay, so I'll be brief, and I'll highlight a few key areas that I think are going to be potentially priorities for in the strategy. One, of course, is moving from cash to digital. I think if cash is still being used for transactions, payments, salaries, social transfers, and so on, then the potential for actually building fintech applications, platforms is extremely limited. So connectivity, digital ID is critical for people, enabling people to participate and transact online with government electronically, with private sector, with e-commerce. And I think also, given how banked Seychelles is, this is likely not, I mean, this is certainly not an M-Pesa case. What this seems to be is more of an open banking case, perhaps. So how do non-banks get access to consumer data? So that non-banks who, and it's not always the case, but can be relatively nimble and able to focus on underserved market niches and product areas where products are not developed, how can they access that data and access the platforms that banks already have in terms of interacting with consumers? Banks have a critical role to play in innovating as well and bringing products to market. So the government, I think, is going to be, it's no secret, I think that's already been identified by the government and multiple speakers. Government can drive this. The government can drive adoption of digital financial services by shifting the way government makes payments, pays wages, does procurement, how taxes are paid. By shifting everything digital, that's a major driver already. That pushes people to adopt and use, and that gives banks and non-banks the business case for introducing digital products, because then should be uptake. They won't just get left not used. Need to understand incentives. Cash typically is heavily subsidized. It's invisible, but it's heavily subsidized. So maybe unpicking what are the incentives around use of cash in the economy. We have a diagnostic of this we can share. We haven't done it here, but we can just share how it's done. Data availability we've referred to. It's been referred to multiple times. Information asymmetry is a major constraint for credit. If a variety of credit, longer-term credit, more tailored versions of credit, financing, equity financing, all linked to information asymmetry. The credit information system has been discussed, and as Norbert was referring to, factoring, online platforms need access to consumer data, including credit data. So this need to deepen financial inclusion. I think access is there, but the depth of financial inclusion, the richness of financial inclusion is not there yet. So maybe just a final suggestion or point is, again, returning to this idea of using the strategy as a platform for engaging all the different actors. The Department of ICT, DIST here, is a critical player in this, as are telecoms companies, as are MNOs. The process of getting regulations through, regulatory reform, competition frameworks, regulations and frameworks around use of data, these are all absolutely critical to a thriving fintech industry. So getting the digitization in place, getting deep financial inclusion in place, usage, then gives the platform for fintech applications and platforms. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Brenda.
Thank you, Doug. I know we've run out of time, and I have a last question to Secretary of State, and this question is really to sum up all that the panelists have been saying. We have talked a lot about coordination, collaboration, cooperation. These are all nice words. We know that in the Seychelles that there are a lot of strategies being developed and also a national development strategy. So how will you align all these other strategies at country level?
Indeed, there's a lot of strategies being developed by the different sectors. For example, this year on the National AML CFT Committee, we need to have a national AML CFT strategy. There has been discussion since last year for a financial sector strategy. Education is doing their strategy, the fisheries sector, the agricultural sector, and so on. But I think one of the main components that will have an overall hierarchy that will have oversight of all of these strategies, the national development strategy. And this is something that government is doing based on the national vision of the country, National Vision 2033. We are hopeful to launch the Vision 2033 in July of this year. And with that, we will have 3 5-year national development strategy. And we should be able to launch the first 5 years national development strategy, which will anchor the other strategies. So the other sectors needs to use the national development strategy as the main one to be able to drive their strategies going forward. But I think one main component is the internal discussion. Within government, we need to see those strategies working together, not in silos. Previously, we've mentioned about the different policies being done. Are those policies being done with what exists today or what the other sectors are saying? So we need to ensure that national, as a government, we need to talk within the ministries, the regulatory entities as well needs to talk within one another. But one key component is the discussion with the private sector, because we will put the enable environment for the private sector to grow, but we need to discuss with them what are we putting as a national development strategy or the different strategies, if this will enable them to grow as Seychelles or as a country. But definitely the national development strategy will be the anchor of all the strategies in Seychelles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. I think this is all the questions that we have time for. Kindly a round of applause for the distinguished panelists. Thank you very much. Let's go.
Thank you, Mr. Bissing and panelists. The past 2.5 days have witnessed profound deliberations, as well as insightful presentations and debate on key considerations around fintech. There's been sharing of experiences and expertise from both a local perspective as well as global trends. The workshop has served to facilitate dialogue between key stakeholders among the implementers of fintech solutions, policymakers, and regulators in line with their respective mandates. This will ensure that there is a comprehensive understanding of the opportunities and challenges of such developments. The wealth of information shared over the last few days will surely assist in achieving the arching objective of the endeavor, which is the development of a national fintech strategy for Seychelles. As we conclude, I would like to invite the Governor of the Central Bank of Seychelles, Ms. Carolina Bell, to deliver her closing remarks.
Secretary of State. Secretary of State, Deputy Executive Director of AFI, Program Leader of the World Bank, representatives of central banks, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The past 2.5 days have been an insightful journey for us all, especially the local stakeholders, as it has provided us with the necessary interactions to help demystify the concept of fintech. If there is one thing that has become clear from the discussions, it is this. It is important for us to be on the same page if we are to embrace the opportunities and efficiently mitigate the risk that technological advances bring to the financial sector and indeed the economy as a whole. We are now better equipped with much needed information for the work to begin on drawing up our national fintech strategy, one that clearly outlines what we can and what needs to be done, by whom, and in what time frame. The challenge that we now face, and it is not an insurmountable one, is to educate and empower our local population so that they embrace the move towards more digitization with less suspicion and eventually see the benefits that fintech can bring to their daily lives. The fact that Seychelles is small means that we can do things more efficiently and roll out new initiatives faster with the support and participation of all relevant stakeholders and partners. At this juncture, I take the opportunity to express our sincere appreciation to our international partners, notably the World Bank and AFI, without whom this event would not have had the same high-level engagement and interaction. We are also grateful for the learning experiences and innovative ideas shared by all our moderators, panelists, and delegates. Your active participation is much appreciated and has contributed to the success of this workshop. A word of thanks is extended to the local financial sector regulators and financial industry players who have shown a keen interest in moving the fintech agenda forward. The end of this workshop today signals the beginning of much work that cannot be done in silos if we are to move the financial sector into the digital and technological era. I therefore urge all partners to keep this momentum going and stay on course with our target of delivering a national fintech strategy by the end of 2019. I also express a vote of thanks to the Secretariat and all our partners for their logistical support. On this note, I would like to thank you for your attention and active participation over the last few days, and look forward to working with you all on building a fintech platform for Seychelles. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. On behalf of the Central Bank of Seychelles, you are now cordially invited to join us for a lunch with a touch of a Seychelles culture in the men restaurant at the entrance of the hotel. Thank you, and for our international partners, we wish you a safe trip back home. Thank you.